The smell of jasmine garlands clung to the air, sweet and almost dizzying. My silk blouse whispered against my skin every time I shifted in my chair, the golden embroidery catching the warm glow of the evening lights strung across the courtyard. Women's voices floated in overlapping melodies, laughter, gossip, the clinking of glass bangles, while the men debated seating charts and catering. It was the day before my brother's wedding, and the house was alive with the kind of chaos only family celebrations could create. I leaned back, exhaling softly, watching cousins chase each other between the rows of folded chairs. My phone buzzed against the table beside me, but I ignored it, letting the vibration fade into the noise. And then, almost absent-mindedly, I said it. I can't wait for tomorrow. The words slipped out with a smile, but the reaction was immediate. Across from me, my aunt froze. Her teacup stopped midway to her lips, porcelain trembling against the rim of her saucer. Her eyes, sharp, lined with kohl, widened ever so slightly, like she'd just heard a prophecy instead of a casual remark. For a beat, the room felt quieter. Someone laughed too loudly, another cousin asked for more chai, and the spell broke. But my aunt didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on me, steady and unnerving, like she knew something I didn't. I brushed it off with a half-smile, but inside, a knot tightened. Her silence said more than words ever could. And when my phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made my heart sink, I realized tomorrow wasn't just my brother's wedding day. Tomorrow was the day my past would come calling. I was 17, the first time I felt the weight of silence pressed against my chest like a stone. It was the night before another family gathering, my cousin's engagement, a night of music and celebration. The house had been glowing with fairy lights, laughter spilling from every corner. But I remember sitting in the kitchen, my hands trembling as I clutched the edge of the counter, trying to find the courage to speak. I had seen something that wasn't meant to be ignored, something ugly that gnawed at me whenever I tried to sleep. My voice shook as I tried to tell them, my parents, my aunt, my uncle. My heart was beating so fast it hurt, but I thought maybe if I said it out loud, if I exposed it, I could protect myself, protect others. Instead, I was met with stares colder than the marble floor beneath my feet. Not tonight, my mother had whispered harshly, her nails biting into my wrist. Don't you dare ruin this occasion with your drama. My uncle's voice boomed in agreement. You think anyone will believe you? Stop imagining things. And my aunt, the same one who froze yesterday, was the first to look away, sipping her tea as if my pain were nothing but background noise. The lump in my throat was so big, I thought I'd choke on it. My palms were sweaty, nails digging into my skin just to keep from screaming. I swallowed my words. I swallowed myself. It was then that my grandmother found me. She wasn't soft-spoken like the others expected her to be. She pressed a silver bracelet into my hand, the one with tiny bells that chimed when I moved. Her whisper was fierce, almost urgent. One day, they will hear you. One day, your voice will be the only one that matters. Until then, wear this and remember who you are. That night, I didn't ruin the engagement. I let the music drown out my truth. But inside, something shifted. If they wouldn't hear me, then I would find a way to make them listen. Not with screams. Not with tears. But with a life so undeniable, so unshakable, that their silence would collapse under the weight of my existence. That was the night I decided I would never beg to be believed again. The first night I left home for the city, the bracelet jingled softly against my wrist with every step, as if reminding me I wasn't walking alone. My bag was light, just a few clothes, some books, and the savings I'd hidden from odd tutoring jobs. But my heart was heavier than anything I carried. The city was merciless. Its noise, its speed, its indifference, all of it pressed against me like a test I hadn't studied for. I rented a single room in a crumbling building where the paint peeled off the walls, and the fan rattled louder than my thoughts. Nights were long, filled with doubts that clawed at me. Had I made a mistake? Was I strong enough? Would they be right about me after all? But every morning, I dragged myself out of bed. I taught English in the mornings at a dusty coaching center, worked in a bookstore in the evenings, and studied accounting on borrowed textbooks at night. The exhaustion was bone deep, but each paycheck, no matter how small, was a victory. My first salary was barely enough to cover rent and food, but I remember holding that envelope like it was proof of my existence. I found unexpected allies along the way. Mrs. Kapoor, the bookstore owner, was one of them. A widow with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, she noticed how quickly I learned to balance her books. "You're wasted on these shelves," she said once, sliding a cup of chai toward me. "Come sit. I'll teach you what real business looks like." Under her guidance, I learned more than numbers. I learned negotiation, confidence, the art of walking into a room and not shrinking. She became the mentor I never knew I needed. Of course, there were failures too. Deals that fell through. Clients who laughed at my age. Nights I cried into my pillow, wondering if my family was right, if all this pain was just rebellion with no reward. But then, something always pulled me back. The memory of being silenced, of my aunt's eyes sliding away, of my grandmother's fierce whisper. Slowly, painfully, things began to change. My first small win came when I helped Mrs. Kapoor save her shop from debt by restructuring her accounts. She hugged me, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "You have a gift." That was the first time I believed it might be true. From there, opportunities opened. I built contacts, offered freelance consultancy, and saved every rupee I could. Within a few years, I had enough to start my own firm. It was tiny, tucked away in a single rented office, but it had my name on the door, and that meant everything. All the while, I kept my success hidden from my family. On calls, I spoke vaguely. "Yes, I'm fine. Work is busy. Nothing special." On social media, I posted pictures of coffee cups, sunsets, and the occasional book. Never the late nights, never the signed contracts, never the awards I quietly received. They thought I was just surviving. But in truth, I was building an empire brick by brick. And every time the bells on my bracelet chimed, I reminded myself, one day, they will hear me. The morning after my aunt froze at my words, the house was alive with the electricity of wedding day chaos. Laughter spilled out of every room, children darted between elders carrying trays of sweets, and music floated from the courtyard speakers. I slipped away quietly, dressed not in my bridal wear finery for the day's ceremonies, but in a cream blazer over a simple dress. My bracelet chimed softly as I fastened it, its silver bells catching the sunlight streaming through the window. Today wasn't just about my brother's wedding.
Today was about me.
By noon, my family arrived at my office. They thought I had forgotten something, documents, perhaps, or a minor errand before the festivities. But when they stepped through the glass doors, they froze as though they'd walked into another world. The space was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. Art lined the walls, not expensive for the sake of it, but pieces I'd chosen over the years, each one telling a fragment of my journey. Bookshelves stood heavy with volumes on finance, leadership, and history. And behind the reception desk, etched in silver letters, was the name of my firm. My name. I watched them take it all in. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes flicked around the room as if searching for a catch. My cousins whispered to one another. And my aunt, she stood rooted to the spot, the same haunted stillness I'd seen in her face when I'd said, "I can't wait for tomorrow." I let the silence linger. Let them breathe it in. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, the opposite of the trembling girl they once silenced. "This is my world. My work. My life. Everything you thought I couldn't do, I did, without your blessing, without your belief, without your protection." My uncle laughed nervously. This is yours." I smiled, not cruelly, but with the quiet triumph of a truth finally revealed.
"Yes."
"Every inch of it. I own this company. I lead its teams. I built it from nothing, while you all believed I was lost." Shock rippled through them. My mother clutched her dupatta, whispering, "But you never said—" "No," I interrupted gently. "Because you never asked. You only assumed." Their eyes darted to my aunt then, as if she held the answers. Her face was pale, lips trembling, but she said nothing. I walked them through the office, pointing out milestones, awards displayed in glass cases, photos of projects and partnerships, notes of gratitude from clients. Each detail was a stone laid against the wall of disbelief they had built around me. By the time we returned to the main hall, the weight of the truth hung heavy. My cousin stared at me with something close to awe. My father's silence cracked into pride he was too stubborn to voice. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears. And my aunt finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "I always knew you'd do something, but I didn't think it would be this." Her words sounded less like admiration and more like confession. I tilted my head. "Then why did you look so afraid yesterday when I said I couldn't wait for tomorrow?" Her gaze faltered. The room waited, but her silence told me everything. She remembered the girl she had once chosen not to protect, and she feared the woman that girl had become. For the first time in years, every eye in the room was on me. Not in mockery, not in dismissal, but in something heavier. Expectation. Fear. Respect. I sat at the head of the conference table, the glass gleaming beneath my palms, the bracelet chiming faintly as I folded my hands. I wasn't the trembling girl they once silenced. I was the woman who held the power now, and they knew it. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," I began, my voice calm but firm. "But if we're going to move forward as a family, there need to be changes. Conditions." The words seemed to ripple through them, sharp and unavoidable. I turned to my father first. His eyes were lowered, his pride fighting with his guilt. "You always said a woman's worth is measured in obedience. That ends today. You will respect my choices, and you will never again reduce me, or any woman in this family, to silence. If you want my support, then you start by unlearning what you've taught." He shifted uncomfortably, but he nodded, the stiffness in his shoulders betraying how difficult the words were to swallow. Next was my mother. Her face was streaked with tears, but I remembered the night her hand dug into my wrist, forcing me into silence. "You taught me fear," I said softly. "You chose appearances over truth. I need you to choose differently now. Stand for your daughters, your nieces, for the women who cannot speak. No more pretending. No more, not tonight. If you can't promise that, you'll lose me again." Her sob broke the room's tension. She reached for my hand, whispering, "I promise." Then my gaze shifted to my cousins, the boys who once mocked me, who called me dramatic for crying when no one believed me. "You want my help with your careers, your ventures? Then prove to me you'll use your voices to lift, not to silence. The next time you see injustice, you speak. You defend. You don't look away." Their heads bowed in unison, shame written across their young faces. Finally, my eyes locked with my aunt's. She was the hardest to face. She hadn't shouted at me that night years ago. She had simply looked away. And sometimes silence wounds more deeply than cruelty. "You froze yesterday because you remembered," I said, my voice steady. "You saw the girl you left unprotected sitting right in front of you. I don't need your apology. What I need is your honesty. You will never again turn away from the truth, no matter how uncomfortable."
Can you live with that?
Her lips trembled, eyes glistening. After a long silence, she whispered, "Yes, I can." The air shifted. For the first time, I wasn't the one bending, breaking, or begging. I was the one setting the terms. And they, the people who once silenced me, were the ones listening. I leaned back, letting the bells of my bracelet sing softly as I said the final word. "If you want me in your lives, these are my conditions. Not requests. Conditions. Take them, or lose me forever." No one dared to argue. The wedding began that evening with drums, laughter, and the scent of roses heavy in the air. My brother stood radiant in his sherwani, my new sister-in-law glowing at his side. Music spilled into the courtyard, cousins danced, elders clapped in rhythm. On the surface, nothing had changed, but I felt it, the shift. When my father introduced me to a group of relatives, his voice carried a new weight. "This is my daughter," he said almost proudly, "the one who runs her own firm." My mother stayed close to me all night, not with watchful control, but with a quiet protectiveness I had never known from her. My cousins lingered near, listening, asking questions, their arrogance softened into respect. And my aunt, she avoided me at first, her eyes darting away in the crowd. But later, as I stood beneath the jasmine archway watching the newlyweds dance, she came to my side. Her hand brushed mine, tentative, almost childlike. "I should have been there for you," she murmured, voice breaking. "I won't fail you again." I didn't answer with words. I simply lifted my wrist, letting the silver bracelet catch the light. The tiny bells chimed, delicate but strong, carrying my grandmother's voice back to me. "One day, they will hear you."
And now they did.
As the night wore on, I stood in the middle of the courtyard, surrounded by laughter, by music, by people who had once doubted me but could no longer deny me. My past was still there, scarred into me, shaping me, but it no longer defined me. Tomorrow would come, just as it always does. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I smiled, lifting my head high, my heart steady. I can't wait for tomorrow. This time no one froze. They all listened,